everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are joining us from, welcome. Today, we gather on this International Women's Day, a day to celebrate, reflect, and most importantly, take action. It's a day to honor the invaluable contribution of women and girls worldwide while acknowledging the barriers still preventing them from realizing their rights. Today, we focus on the intersection of gender justice and biodiversity conservation. At the CBD Women's Caucus, we firmly believe that no meaningful biodiversity conservation can take place without gender justice. We are happy today to discuss the Gender and Biodiversity Champions platform, which is about more than just words. It's a bold and collective action so our goal for this interview is to ensure that women's rights and also girls' rights at the heart of biodiversity policies, financing, and action. This platform is not just a vision, it is a call to action. We are here to emphasize the urgent need to the full implementation of the Gender Plan of Action under the Convention of Biological Diversity. The Gender and Biodiversity Champions platform that launched at COP16 in Cali, Colombia, brings together governments, representatives, civil society, indigenous people, local communities, youth, the private sector, and other stakeholders. Its mission is to ensure that gender is integrated into the fabric of biodiversity policies, actions, and funding. My name is Fatima El-Aaraby, and I'm the comms lead for the CBD Women's Caucus, and I'm going to moderate this exclusive interview with Madam Astrid Schomaker. We are really very honored and pleased to welcome you with us in the celebration of the International Day of Women. Madam Astrid Schomaker is the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation, Madam Astrid. And alongside, we have the board member also the representative of the CBD Women's Caucus, Madam Cicilia Wangari from Kenya. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for joining this exclusive interview with Madam Astrid Schomaker. Madam Astrid, thank you so much for joining. My question, or the first question, since we have just wrapped up the COP 16.2 in Rome, we would love to hear from you since you were in the front line during this conversation. Could you please share with us your reflections on the outcomes of the COP 16? What progress have we made? And the challenges remain, and what lessons have we learned in the fight for gender justice and biodiversity? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Fatima, and hello, everybody, and thank you for organizing this on International Women's Day. This is so important because, as we always say, our biodiversity challenges are massive, and they really need all hands on deck, and we can't really afford that half of the population is not enabled and not empowered to contribute all that they might contribute. And that's why we love to work together with you in the Women's Caucus. And coming now to the question on COP16, I think it was a super important COP16. I think some of our listeners may know it was the first COP after the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And so we were now turning very much our eyes on implementation, so saying we have ambitious goals for 2030, but how are we advancing, and do we have the right tools in place in order to reach those objectives? And in that perspective, at COP16, both in Cali and then in Rome, we took important decisions. And maybe I start with the first one, coming back to this idea that we need everybody to come together and the contributions of everybody. And in Cali, we managed to adopt 2 decisions related to indigenous peoples and local communities. And one was to set up a new subsidiary body, we call that the body on 8J in our jargon, that really enables indigenous peoples and local communities to bring their contributions better into the discussions that we're having at CBD. And at the same time, we also adopted a work program that would allow us to focus more directly on the challenges these groups have, but also to value the contributions and the traditional knowledge that they can bring to the table. In all of that, the role of women and children has been highlighted, and that's very important. I want to link to that also another decision on a more technical subject. It's called digital sequencing information. This is about companies using this digital sequencing information on genetic resources to make products, basically, to make profits. So we're talking, for example, about the cosmetics industry, about pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, animal breeding. All these companies are able to use genetic information that is digitally sequenced, freely available, and integrate that into their products and then make money with it. And the decision that we have taken is now operationalizing a multilateral mechanism for these companies and businesses to put money back into the system in order to give back to nature. And that money, it has been said, will be given directly to countries that protect biodiversity. And within this decision, we've also said that 50% of the fund should go to indigenous people and local communities. So these are a set of 3 important decisions that we took in Cali, amongst many others. And then moving forward to Rome, because we could not finish in Cali for lack of time, basically. We looked then in more detail at resource mobilization, because that remains one of our biggest challenges. The financing gap for biodiversity is huge. And countries have made important commitments at COP15 in 2022, how they would like to fill this gap. And the issue was, do we really have all the right tools at our disposal? Do we have the right resource mobilization strategy? And to decide on that has taken us quite some time, because there were different perspectives. But now in Rome, we were able to take a decision, or several decisions. One on the resource mobilization strategy that gives us a clear way forward to 2030 and how we will be filling this gap, and then also on the financial mechanism, because we have been operating for a long time with an interim financial mechanism. And in Rome as well, we decided again how this interim situation can be turned into a permanent situation. So that was a very important step forward. At the same time, and then looking towards COP17, which will take place in 2026 in Yerevan. This is the moment when we will do our first global stock take. Then we will be right in the middle of the 2022 to 2030 trajectory. And in 2026, we then need to take stock and say, are we actually on track? And for that, it was important for us that we could adopt decisions on all the modalities on this global review, what feeds into it, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we managed to do that. So I think we're on a good way towards COP17. But at the same time, I think we also need a global surge in implementation. And one of the lessons learned, I think, is in these COPs, we need to look more at all the practical difficulties that parties experience in implementation. Many of these difficulties are linked precisely again to bringing all stakeholders on board. So we talk about all of government and whole of society approaches. And that's complex because not all ministries have, experience with working with stakeholders. So there's a lot of, I think, mutual support necessary. Countries have made different experiences. The UN system can help. And this is increasingly at the fore of the discussions. And then another lesson learned in a much more practical way, I would say, our decisions are very long. So we noticed also, we saw that in Cali, parties, of course, need time to digest them, to come to agreement. And so that's an issue that we also need to look at over time. So can we make our decisions more concise? Do we always have to repeat things that were already negotiated before? Can we just maybe focus on concrete action items in the future? So we in the Secretariat, we want to discuss a lot with our parties and so the Bureau in the next years, how we move forward and how we can make sure that when we have a full agenda, and we must have a full agenda because the challenges are very broad, how can we make sure we cover the whole agenda in the time that we have?
Thank you so much, Madam Astrid, for sharing these profound reflections from the COP16 and in Cali, moving forward to COP 16.2 in Italy, in Rome. Yes, thank you so much, Madam Astrid, for sharing these reflections and these outcomes, and also sharing the challenges and the vision of the secretary ahead to the COP 17 in Armenia. Moving to forward to Cecilia. I have a question, Cecilia, regarding the implementation of Gender Plan of Action and Target 23 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We all know that the Gender Plan of Action already adopted, and it is crucial for advancing gender equality and gender justice in biodiversity. How? My question is how we can translate the decisions made in this framework into reality, how we can translate the text into concrete actions. Um, uh, that directly benefits women and girls, especially those on the front line from the grassroots, uh, and who are really working on the ground. Over to you, Cecilia, to share with us your reflections and how this adopted decision can be translated on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Thank you for organizing this engagement with the Secretariat, and it's especially great to see the leadership of women at the forefront of the Secretariat and leading all of us, including the Women Caucus, into our future advocacy and mainstreaming of gender uh, justice and mainstreaming. So thank you very much, Madam Astrid, for also joining us and for making time to join fellow women in celebration of this auspicious occasion of the International Day for Women all over the world, and also to welcome the most amazing thing that happened at the COP, the launching of the Champions for Gender, because they will translate what we are saying to the ground and keep the voices going. So this for us is a very big opportunity, because in as much as we as Women Caucus have been doing advocacy and seeking to mainstream and engaging with parties and the secretariat, we see the opportunity to have the gender champions as an additional step towards achieving gender justice and the gender plan of action and the general achievement of Target 23. Much for joining us again, and also for the support we have received from the Secretariat over the years. We really appreciate that. So the CBD Women Caucus model is a collaborative model which has seen a group of about 700 women now who are really active in the movement. There are others, but the one who we really see working on the work of the Women Caucus and the advocacy number about 700. And this is a show that we have been growing over the years. The numbers are increasing, and we keep encouraging other women to join the movement. So this is an excellent example of how women can achieve tremendous strides in advocacy for gender justice and for implementation of gender matters at the level of the Convention on Biological Diversity, because the movement has been voluntary. For most of us, it is voluntary. And what happens is that women of like minds join together to push specific agenda. And what you find in this movement of the Women Caucus is something to be celebrated during this International Women's Day. There are women with expertise, they are willing to share the expertise. There are women who are leaders on the ground and they are willing to lead. And there are also women who have excellent expertise in advocacy and coordination. So each of the women, regardless of their age, has brought their expertise to the movement to support the rest of the women and girls in this movement. So the gender champions will not be without support. The support is already there. The movement is growing, so we look forward to more traction towards achieving gender justice and mainstreaming with the support of the gender champions. And thank you also for giving us the opportunity to speak about the gender champions while at the COP. It was a great opportunity for us to also interact with them and know them. And as we plan to move forward, it was always our hope that people understand that Target 23, which was adopted as part of the KMGBF, did bring a lot of gain for women. And reading just the text as it is, just for the listeners out there, it is expected to ensure that there is gender equality in implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. To do this, we will need a gender responsive approach where all women and girls have equal opportunities and capacities to contribute to the three objectives of the convention, including recognizing their equal rights and access to land and natural resources, and their full, equitable, and meaningful and informal participation and leadership at all levels of action, engagement, policy, and decision making, among other things related to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, for this to happen, we have found the Gender Plan of Action, also adopted at COP15, to be very helpful because it helps us articulate the issues that we need to be addressed in a coherent manner. It has three objectives, broad objectives, and the Gender Plan of Action ideally is supposed to support and promote gender responsive implementation of KMGBF, the Kunming Global Biodiversity, and a responsive approach to implementation mechanisms associated with the framework. So this does not only limit us to the Global Biodiversity Framework, it means all work related to programming, to the plans, and to implementation actions on the ground have to take into account the abilities and capacities of women. And where they are not there, we absolutely, for example, expected outcome one, an objective where all people, in particular women, capacity to contribute to the three objectives of the convention. That is like have achieved. Unfortunately for the women, this gender plan of action has a time frame up to 2030. It's very near, so we expect a lot of support. And here we fall back to the gender champions and the secretariat and the parties to see to it that we achieve all these targets. And here you will find that not only do we have the expected outcome one on the equal opportunity for all women and girls, we also have the number two, where we expect that biodiversity policy, planning, and programming decisions address equally the perspectives, interests, needs, and human rights of all people, in particular all women and girls. So for us, this has been something that we are looking for in institutions, and we are quite happy to report institutions, including the Jeff Small Grants Program, showing us how they have managed to put gender mainstreaming actions within the grant making process. So that was also very encouraging for us. And finally, if I may mention, we also have the expected outcome number three, which hopes for us that we will achieve enabling conditions to ensure gender responsive implementation of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity framework. So you'll find that this gender plan of action has the specific goals that we expect to be achieved and the indicative actions together with the expected deliveries. And we hope for all the support we can get. And this is a great opportunity to call for that support. And yeah, we thank everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam.
Fatima, you may be muted.
You can hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Cicilia, for sharing this powerful intervention and for highlighting the urgent need for including the women into the decision making, and also for hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, and also highlighting the great work that the CBD Women's Caucus are doing, the collective work of the women who are doing um, who are doing an amazing work, volunteering their time, their expertise to uh, to achieve the full implementation of the gender plan of action, and also to translate what is agreed during the Kunming Montreal GBF. Now I will go back to Madam Astrid to ask her, since we are celebrating this day and we are also spotlighting the gender and biodiversity champions from all over the world, and it's time, I think, that's Madam Astrid, the Executive Secretary, to share with us her declaration in this significant day. Your leadership will inspire others to step up and to declare themselves as gender and biodiversity champions, and also to drive this movement forward. This is the moment that we have been waiting, and also we are ready to act. Over to you, Madam Astrid, to share with us your commitment for the upcoming years regarding the Gender and Biodiversity Champion, and how you are committed to fully implementing the Gender Plan of Action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatima and Cecilia. I think it was really great to hear from you. So there's nothing I think I do with more pleasure than declare myself a gender and biodiversity champion. I mean, obviously, I am a woman, and I think as a woman, we all share a specific perspective on biodiversity. And I think we are simply more aware that there is part of our society, and women and children, women and girls in particular, that face specific challenges and that are not always heard, because throughout governments and throughout the role of women is still not at the level where it should be. Even though I think we recognize we are on an ascending slope, and I think across the world we also see good signs of women empowerment, but there's still a huge knowledge gap in particular, and there's still a lot of capacity building necessary to understand, for example, how biodiversity loss affects women and girls in particular, but also to understand what specific contributions women and girls can make. So as Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, I'm of course super happy to be able to work with women and to have this action plan as a tool basically at our disposal. So we don't just have a target, but we have broken down the target in more specific objectives and also in more achievable, let's say, steps that we're taking. And there's a lot of positive movement that we see. And one thing I want to highlight there in particular, and I come back to something I said before, You know that the implementation of our framework is about national action. We can, negotiate great things at international level, but then we go back to our parties, to the country governments, and say, no, this has to be implemented. In our case, it has to be implemented through national biodiversity strategies and action plans. And as I said before, it's difficult, I think, for governments to be in this role of convener sometimes. So what we need to do as women, I think we have to both push our way in, so go to government and say, here we are, please hear us. But then also from the Secretariat perspective, we need to do what we can in order to speak to governments and say, look, this is an obligation you have. You stand to gain from that. Your biodiversity in your country stand to gain from it. Please do it, but then be concrete about the tools that we have. And here I want to mention that the government of Canada has just come in under the umbrella of the NBSUP Accelerator Partnership to help us spend additional, let's say, money in practical terms on gender transformative systems thinking. So bringing the gender aspect into this NBSUP implementation. There's been a couple of countries have been selected as the first strategic partners for this project. So I think that bodes well for the future. And then, of course, as Secretariat, we are going to be very serious about the midterm review. I've mentioned that before. So there are two things that come together: the overall midterm review of the Conway-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but also the review on the Gender Action Plan. And that is something that we are doing now. I'm also happy to say, by the way, that we will soon have a colleague in the Secretariat dealing more specifically with gender issues. So I hope we can also reach out more actively to you and be as responsive as we can. But this sort of specific review we will do now, and that can then be discussed at our subsidiary bodies, so that by COP17 we have a clear idea of how the Gender Action Plan has been implemented and whether it has actually lived up to the expectations that we all had, or whether we have to do some corrective action. So it's an absolute pleasure to work with the Women's Caucus. And looking back at Kali, I think one personal reflection I had, the meetings that we had of the Women's Caucus there, they were joyful. They were, we all face big challenges, but the women came together there with such a can-do attitude, and so much energy was in the room. And if we are able to maintain that energy, not just today on Women's Day, but throughout the year and throughout the world, I think we will be able to achieve great things together. And I'm very, very happy to be a gender and biodiversity champion and to working with all of you to make it happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Madam Astrid, for sharing your declaration as Gender and Biodiversity Champion. We are really very pleased and honored to have your commitment with us. And yeah, now I think that's our interview coming to the end. I will give the floor to Madam Cicilia to share a short intervention before we close our exclusive interview. Thank you. Over to you, Madam Cicilia.
Thank you. My short intervention. First of all, I actually look forward to the continued partnership with the Secretariat. Astrid has also been very graceful and supportive of our activities. So I have a lot of hope, and I want everybody else and every woman in the world to have much more hope. And also because we have a lot of work to do, I think it's also good to convene more often, more periodic way that is predictable, so that we can continue planning our goals. And I think we will be looking for Madam Astrid and that you
sorry,
be
Madam Cecilia. I think that we are losing
us,
your voice.
like you have said, And it will also be great to hear what the Secretariat's plans are so that we can also see how we come in. And we really thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Fatima?
Therefore, thank you so much, Madam Cecilia, for this intervention. On behalf of the CBD Women's Caucus, I would like to thank you both for joining us. Thank you so much, Madam Astrid, for giving us this opportunity to hear from you regarding the outcomes of the COP16 and also the route to the COP17. And also, thank you so much, Madam Cecilia, for your intervention and for your powerful messages. Thank you so much for the declaration of the Executive Secretary as Gender and Biodiversity Champions. Let's continue to work together to ensure that gender and biodiversity are not separate causes, but part of the same movement for a fairer and more just world. And also, I would like to extend the invitation to don't forget to sign up and to join us in this commitment to fully implement the gender plan of action. We are going to share the link in all our platforms to sign up and to be part of this movement and to be also committed to have and to live in a more just world. Goodbye and happy International Women's Day. Thank you so much, Madam Astrid. Thank you so much, Madam Cecilia. Thank you so much to all the people who are watching us
Thank you
online
very
on YouTube. Thank you so much.
much.
Thank you. Happy Women's Day.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Happy International